Welcome back to France 24. We are live from Paris. The headlines this hour. Donald Trump lifts sanctions on Turkey after Ankara complies with a ceasefire in northeastern Syria. Critics of Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. troops, meanwhile, say the president is now being outplayed in the region by Russia. As Lebanon's government struggles to quell protests, France 24 reporters travel to a stronghold of the prime minister and find that support for Saad Hariri in Tripoli is dwindling. Also coming up in Perspective, I'll be speaking to the founder of Europe's first crowdfunding platform known as the Women's World Wide Web. It's dedicated to girls and women's empowerment. That's coming up in 10 minutes' time. Stay with us. We're live from Paris. But first, the U.S. president has lifted sanctions on Turkey. Donald Trump justifying his move as a ceasefire brokered by the United States continues to hold in northeastern Syria. On Wednesday, an agreement reached between Russia and Turkey went into effect. It requires Kurdish fighters to pull back 30 kilometers from the Turkish border. Critics of Mr. Trump's decision to withdraw from Syria say the president has caved to Turkey and is now being outplayed in the region by Russia.
The government of Turkey informed my administration that they would be stopping combat and their offensive in Syria and making the ceasefire permanent, and it will indeed be permanent. However, you would also define the word permanent in that part of the world as somewhat questionable. We all understand that, but I do believe it will be permanent. I've therefore instructed the Secretary of the Treasury to lift all sanctions imposed on October 14th in response to Turkey's original offensive moves against the Kurds in Syria's northeast border region.
U.S. President Donald Trump speaking there. Now, Russia has filled the void left from the U.S. withdrawal in Syria. On Wednesday, the Kremlin warned Kurdish fighters to withdraw 30 kilometers from the Turkish border or risk being steamrolled by Ankara.
The wheels are set in motion for the Russian military to take joint control of several points across the Syrian border with the Turkish military.
We are 2 kilometers away from the town of Ain al-Arab at the moment. Here, a detachment of military police of the Russian army will patrol along the border and will be deployed at a base.
The zone is 10 kilometers deep. The rest of the 440-kilometre border will be controlled by Turkey and its Syrian rebel allies. As of noon on Wednesday, Kurdish troops were given less than a week to retreat by at least 30 kilometres. It's a crushing blow to the Kurds, who've lost many key towns. Pictured here is what is thought to be the YPG HQ in Ras Al Ain, now draped in the Syrian and Turkish flag. In the city of Kamishli, protesters took to the streets bearing pictures of dead fighters, including prominent politician Hevrin Halaf, who was killed by Turkish-backed forces earlier this month.
We lost 11,000 martyrs to protect the people of northeastern Syria and to protect the whole world from the Islamic State group. So we want a safe area under the protection of the United Nations.
Amnesty International called the disregard for civilian life during the Turkish offensive shameful. And the US says that Syrian opposition forces have committed war crimes. In the past week, over 7,000 people have fled to refugee camps in Iraq.
Protesters in Lebanon are vowing to stay out onto the streets until the entire government collapses. On Wednesday, they protested for the 7th day in a row. The growing movement in the northern city of Tripoli is particularly bad news for the country's prime minister. The majority Sunni city has been a bastion of support for Saad Hariri's family. But France 24 reporters on the ground met people who believe Hariri is corrupt and incompetent.
After the death of Rafik al-Hariri, his son Saad came to power, and we thought the good times were back. But then we realized Saad wasn't much of a politician.
Meet Baria, a mother of two and in many ways a typical Tripoli resident. a trained nurse who can't find a job. She's one of the 55% of people in this neighborhood out of work.
This area is extremely poor. If people here work, they eat. If there's no work, they don't.
Nothing in Bab el-Tabani works quite as it should. Take electricity, for example. All Lebanese people endure 3 hours a day without power. But here, it's up to 18 hours.
Look at all these cables. Everyone is just taking power for themselves. And in the rain, the electricity cables touch the water tank. Just think of what could happen. The state does nothing here. Just look at all the trash.
Lebanon's civil war ended 29 years ago, but there are still sporadic clashes here with a rival Shiite neighborhood. A bullet hit this mirror 5 years ago, and Beria can't afford to have it fixed.
Look how little water there is. If I don't shower, there will be water in the tap. But if I do take a shower, there's none here.
Lebanon is a resource-rich country. It should have plenty of water. But years of corruption and mismanagement have strained its public services to breaking point and pushed its people out into the streets.
We hope the revolution works. It has to. Here, nobody helps us. No social institution, no government bodies. We're just left like this. We won't accept it. We are tired and fed up.
Beria is not alone. Hundreds of thousands of people here in Lebanon's second city are increasingly frustrated with the lack of water, electricity, and the declining standards of living. Tripoli is normally a bastion of support for Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri, but last night's anti-government protests were the biggest yet, and for the moment, they show no sign of abating.
Nadia Masi reporting there from the Lebanese city of Tripoli. Now, 2 weeks after European lawmakers overwhelmingly rejected Emmanuel Macron's pick for the post of European Commissioner, the French president has now proposed Thierry Breton for the role. According to the Élysée, Breton, who is chief executive of Atos and a former French finance minister, is seen as a man of action who knows industrial issues and has an understanding of how Brussels operates.